Still single at 36? Guess some women just fail twice. My dad shouted across the graduation dinner while people laughed nervously around him. My sister covered her mouth to hide a smile, and the sound of silverware clinking against plates suddenly felt louder than the music in the restaurant. I stood there holding my niece's graduation gift while my father raised his wine glass again. Maybe next year we'll celebrate someone who actually succeeded. I turned toward the exit, humiliated, ready to disappear, when the restaurant doors opened and a gray-haired stranger walked straight toward me carrying a sealed brown file with my name on it. My name is Vanessa Carter, and I'm 36 years old. At the time, I worked as a high school counselor at a public school outside Columbus, Ohio. Most of my students came from broken homes, angry homes, or homes where nobody listened to them. Funny enough, helping those kids survive emotional pain became easier than surviving my own family. I wasn't always divorced. I married young because I thought love meant loyalty. I spent 11 years trying to keep a marriage alive while my husband slowly stopped seeing me as a partner. He ignored me for months at a time, forgot birthdays, dismissed my opinions, and treated my emotions like an inconvenience. When the marriage ended, there was no cheating scandal or dramatic affair. Just years of loneliness finally collapsing under their own weight. But to my family, divorce was shameful. Especially for me. My younger sister Rebecca had married a successful dentist who bought her expensive vacations, designer handbags, and a giant house with white marble floors. Every holiday became a comparison between us. Rebecca walked in wearing diamonds while I brought homemade desserts and wore discount store dresses. I secretly repaired myself. You could have had a life like that too, my mother once told me while washing dishes. If you tried harder. After the divorce, I moved into a tiny apartment above a bakery downtown. Every morning the smell of fresh bread drifted through the floorboards before sunrise. I learned how to survive quietly. I paid my bills. I worked long hours. I cried less each month. Still, my family treated me like a warning sign. Like failure could spread through blood. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. I knew how to endure pain without becoming cruel. If your family ever made you feel smaller because your life didn't look perfect, you're not alone. A lot of people smile in public while carrying private heartbreak nobody talks about. So if you've ever been underestimated after a breakup, financial struggle, or personal failure, subscribe and stay with me. Share your story too, because quiet people usually carry strength others never notice. And click hype if you believe comeback stories matter. The graduation dinner happened 3 weeks after my niece Olivia finished high school. Rebecca reserved a private room at a crowded Italian restaurant downtown. Teachers, cousins, neighbors, and old family friends packed the room so tightly that servers kept bumping into chairs while carrying plates of pasta. I brought Olivia a handmade scrapbook filled with photos from her childhood, ticket stubs from school plays, old birthday pictures, notes from family vacations. I spent weeks making it. Olivia smiled when she opened it. "Aunt Vanessa, this is beautiful." Before I could answer, Rebecca laughed loudly from across the table. Couldn't afford a real gift? Several people looked down at their plates immediately. I forced a smile. "It's personal." Rebecca shrugged. "Sure." Dad had already finished 2 glasses of wine by then. His face was red, and every sentence grew louder than the last. "You know," he announced, leaning back in his chair, "Olivia's smart enough not to end up divorced in some tiny apartment." A few uncomfortable chuckles spread around the room. My cousin Daniel tried changing the subject. "So Olivia, what college are you leaning toward?" Dad ignored him. "Some women lose husbands because they don't know how to keep a man happy." I froze. Even now, I remember the smell of garlic bread and wine mixing in the heavy air, while everyone avoided looking at me. Then the worst part happened. My ex-husband Ethan walked into the restaurant holding hands with one of Rebecca's friends. Apparently they had been invited after all. Nobody warned me. Rebecca stood up smiling. "Look who made it." I grabbed my purse immediately. Olivia whispered, "Aunt Vanessa, wait." But I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. As I turned toward the exit, Dad grabbed my wrist. "Running away again?" he asked loudly. That's always been your talent. Then the restaurant doors opened. An older man in a gray suit stepped inside carrying a sealed brown envelope. He looked directly at me. Vanessa Carter? The room fell silent. Yes. He handed me the file carefully. Your grandmother requested this be delivered personally. Dad's confident smile disappeared instantly. I took the envelope home and opened it at my kitchen table around midnight. Rain tapped softly against the windows while traffic hummed outside below my apartment building. Inside the file were property documents, handwritten letters, and legal records connected to my grandmother Eleanor Carter. I stared at the papers for nearly an hour before I understood what I was reading. My grandmother had secretly owned 12 acres of land outside town along with a small house near a lake. The property was worth far more than anything I'd ever imagined owning. And according to the documents, my father knew about it for years. I felt sick. Growing up, Grandma Eleanor always treated me differently from the rest of the family. She listened when I spoke. She asked about my dreams. She once told me, "Your kindness is your strength, Vanessa. Don't let bitter people convince you otherwise." After she died, Dad handled all the inheritance discussions himself. He claimed there was nothing valuable left. Apparently that was a lie. The next morning Rebecca called me sounding strangely cheerful. "So," she said casually, "what exactly was in that envelope?" I stayed quiet. "Oh, come on," she laughed. "We're family." Family. Interesting word. That week, relatives who barely spoke to me suddenly started texting, inviting me to dinners, asking how I was doing, pretending concern. Then I heard another rumor. Dad had been telling people I was emotionally unstable after the divorce and probably misunderstood the legal paperwork. "She's confused," he told relatives. "You know how sensitive Vanessa gets." That one hurt more than I expected. Not because strangers believed him, because part of me still wanted my father to respect me. Days later I discovered something worse. The attorney named in the file admitted my father had pressured him years earlier to keep certain inheritance documents buried permanently. I sat in silence after hearing that. Then I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because suddenly my entire life made sense. The insults, the comparisons, the constant reminders that I was weak. My father needed me to stay small because small people don't ask dangerous questions. Family dinners became unbearable after that. Rebecca hugged me too tightly. My mother offered fake sympathy. Dad kept repeating, "We just want what's best for you." No, they wanted control. And for the first time in my life, I stopped apologizing during conversations. "What are you planning to do with the property?" Rebecca asked one afternoon. "That's none of your business," I answered calmly. She blinked in shock. Good. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly preparing for this moment for years. After my divorce, my therapist suggested documenting emotionally abusive interactions because I constantly doubted my own memory. So whenever family gatherings turned cruel, I sometimes recorded conversations privately on my phone. First, I felt guilty doing it. Later, I realized those recordings protected my sanity. Inside the sealed file were also handwritten letters from Grandma Eleanor describing suspicious financial behavior connected to my father. Missing signatures, altered transfers, property records that didn't match public filings. I spread everything across my kitchen table night after night. Voice recordings, bank documents, old legal papers, dates, signatures. I had a plan they never saw coming. Meanwhile, my family kept treating me like the weak daughter desperate for approval. Dad still mocked my apartment. Rebecca still talked down to me. But they had no idea I was organizing evidence quietly while they underestimated me one final time. The stranger from the restaurant had also included the contact information of a respected local attorney named Eleanor Brooks. She was retired but agreed to meet me anyway. Her office smelled like old books and coffee. After reviewing the documents, she looked at me carefully and said, "Your father never expected you to fight back." I swallowed hard. "I don't want revenge." "Good," she replied, "because this isn't revenge. It's truth." Then she warned me, If this becomes public, your family's reputation in town could collapse. I looked down at the recordings in my hands. For years I stayed silent to protect people who humiliated me openly. Silence never saved me. It only protected them. Eleanor Brooks became the ally I never expected. She had worked as my grandparents' lawyer decades earlier before retiring after repeated disagreements with my father over financial decisions. The man always wanted control, she told me one afternoon while reviewing paperwork. Your grandmother saw it too late. She taught me how manipulation works inside families, how shame keeps victims obedient, how kindness often gets mistaken for weakness. Most importantly, she told me to stop apologizing for existing. Together we organized everything carefully. The altered property transfers, the hidden records, the voice recordings where Dad mocked me for being too weak to handle money. Meanwhile, my family became strangely confident again. Rebecca started inviting me over constantly. Mom called pretending to worry about my stress. Then Dad announced a big Sunday dinner so we could settle this family misunderstanding. I knew exactly what that meant. They wanted control back. The dinner took place inside my parents' large suburban house. The same house where I spent years feeling unwanted. Relatives filled the dining room whispering nervously, while plates clattered softly against the table. I carried copies of every document inside my purse. Nobody noticed. Dad greeted me with a fake smile. Glad you finally came to your senses. I almost laughed. This wasn't reconciliation. It was an intervention. And this time I wasn't walking in unprepared. Dad started the confrontation halfway through dinner. You're tearing this family apart over greed, he snapped while relatives watched silently. I folded my hands calmly. Am I? Yes, Rebecca added quickly. You're making everyone uncomfortable. Then the front door opened. Eleanor Brooks walked inside carrying a leather folder. The entire room froze. Dad's face drained of color immediately. What is she doing here? Eleanor placed the folder carefully on the dining table, correcting a very old lie. Nobody spoke. The ticking clock in the hallway suddenly sounded deafening. Eleanor opened the folder and removed several signed documents. Your mother changed her will 6 months before her death, she told my father, after discovering financial manipulation connected to the lake property. Dad stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the floor. That's nonsense. No, Eleanor replied calmly. This is evidence. I reached into my purse and placed my phone on the table. Then I pressed play. Dad's recorded voice filled the room. She's too emotional to handle real money anyway. Another recording followed. Vanessa will never fight back. She always folds. Rebecca covered her mouth. Mom started crying quietly. You spent years calling me worthless, I said finally. Dad pointed at me angrily. Because you act weak. I stared directly at him. No. Because you needed me small enough to control. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Eleanor revealed the handwritten letters from Grandma Eleanor, describing missing paperwork and hidden assets. Several relatives began whispering angrily. Daniel shook his head slowly. Uncle Robert, you really hid this from her? Dad looked cornered for the first time in his life. Rebecca tried interrupting. This is all just a misunderstanding. Eleanor slid another signed document across the table. Actually, it's fraud. Olivia suddenly burst into tears. I'm sorry, Aunt Vanessa, she whispered. I should have defended you at graduation. I softened immediately. None of this is your fault. Dad slammed his hand against the table. I did what I had to do for this family. No, I answered quietly. You did what protected your ego. Then finally, after years of insults and humiliation, my father admitted the truth. I never thought you'd stand up for yourself. There it was. The real reason. Not disappointment. Not concern. Control. I didn't scream. I didn't insult him back. I didn't need to. I simply looked him in the eyes and said, You confused my kindness for weakness. Then I stood up slowly. I'll be claiming exactly what Grandma intended for me. And after tonight, I'm done begging this family to love me correctly. Nobody stopped me. Nobody could. The room sat in stunned silence while decades of manipulation collapsed around them. 3 months later, I moved into the small lake house my grandmother left behind. The porch needed repairs, the kitchen cabinets creaked, and wildflowers had overtaken most of the backyard. I loved it immediately. Every morning I drank coffee beside the water before driving to work at the school. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful instead of exhausted. Some relatives reached out sincerely afterward. Daniel apologized for staying quiet all those years. Olivia visited often during college breaks. Others disappeared completely. Dad called repeatedly for months. I never answered. Not because I hated him, because I finally understood something important. Some people only value you when you stay wounded enough to control. Healing threatens them. Walking away threatens them even more. And honestly, leaving that version of my life behind became the bravest thing I've ever done. The moment I stopped begging to be loved by them was the moment I finally loved myself. Have you ever been humiliated by your own family after divorce, failure, or heartbreak? If you have, I want you to know that somebody else understands that pain too. Share your story in the comments because your voice matters here. Subscribe if you're rebuilding your life after being underestimated by people who should have supported you. Failure does not define your worth. And click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Did this story hit home for you? Then like this video and tell me your thoughts below. I always read the comments, and I know there are so many people quietly carrying family pain they never talk about. Your support helps stories like this reach people who feel alone. Click hype to help this story find others who felt the same way. Your support truly makes a difference.